So now we don't want to show any rooms in the sidebar that the currently logged in user is not a member of. Let me make it so there even is such a room. I have a private room test here. I don't remember what it's like. I'm just going to delete it. Oh, I did break deleting rooms at some point. Cannot read property name of null. Navlink to room/room name. So what happened? So somehow I have one in there that has probably the, this is that issue where we deleted it, so the key is still in there, but it's pointing at null. It hasn't synced with Firebase yet, so it's not completely gone. So that's screwed up right now.
Can you please push the changes you just made?
I think I thought I did. Thought I hit push. So when we start spitting out the nav links inside room link, I have a room that doesn't have a name because it's probably a deleted room. It's just null now. Cannot read property name of null, so I'm trying to say null.name, which means I've gotten to this point in remove room where I set rooms, square bracket room name to null, but I haven't yet synced with Firebase, which means it doesn't know that should just plain go away. So we're not doing anything to keep invalid rooms, completely invalid rooms, from getting listed. So we happen to be getting ready. Do you have something you need to tell them, or just? Okay, cool. So what we're getting ready to do anyway is stop it from listing certain ones in the sidebar, right? So our issue right now, this error is caused by the fact that we're trying to list a room that just plain doesn't exist in the sidebar. But this whole task we're working on right now is not showing rooms that we're not allowed access to. So we'll just test for that along with everything else we're testing. So here's what I want to do. I want to have a method called filtered rooms up in main. And that is going to return only those rooms that should actually be listed in the sidebar. So this .state.rooms is going to sync with Firebase. That's going to contain all the rooms. The ones that we want to show in the sidebar, I'm just going to filter out at this level. So anything that I don't want to see, I'm just not going to include at this point. So this would be a little easier if we had made this .state.rooms an array, but we didn't, did we? It's an object. Let's go and refresh this page and get rid of this error. Okay. So let's look at main real quick in our React Dev Tools. This .state.rooms, here we go. Right, it's an object. So if I want to like loop through it, do a test on each one to see if it should be in the filtered list. I can't just loop over rooms itself. I have to loop over object.keys rooms, right? So something like object.keys, this .state.rooms. That gives me an array of just the room names, right? So have we used have we used filter before? Okay. So we've used for each, we've used map, we've used find, I think, right? Which does a test, and as soon as it finds any match, it returns that. So filter works kind of like find, except it returns all the matches. It's like a combination of find and map. It goes through, runs your provided test function against every item in the array, and for every single item where it's true, it adds that to a new array. So if I say filter It's going to pass in each key, which is a room name, right? So to get the actual room, I can do this.state.rooms square bracket room name. And so how do I decide whether this room should be part of it? Yeah.
Pass it through your filtered room function. Have it pass through all the tests in there, and then
Which I don't have yet, right?
yeah.
Right. So what should those tests actually be? This is that function, basically.
Well, first I checked if it was public or not. If it was, it just passed automatically.
Okay, so if it's public, so we want to allow public rooms. The issue we just had with deleting was that it was letting through rooms that just plain don't exist anymore, right? It was just in plain null. Disallow rooms that don't exist. And what else? If it's not public, you need to be in the list of members, right? Okay. So what we need to remove is rooms that don't exist and rooms that aren't public where you're not in the member list. Seem legit? All right. So how about if not room? So if it's null or something, just return false immediately. Because if we even try to run those other tests on it, if I try to say .public, it'll say cannot read property public of undefined or cannot read property public of null. That classic error you get all the time, cannot read such and such of null or undefined. This is the kind of stuff that leads to that. If you have something that could be null and you try to access a property of it, it's just going to explode immediately. So if that room doesn't exist at all, we'll just return false immediately. Otherwise, it might be okay. So at this point, we want to say either return room.public or, so if it's public, like Jake said, that's cool, we're allowed through. So if public is true, we'll just move on. Otherwise, we'll do the right side of the or, which is, this doesn't exist, but like this dot includes current user room. We want to test whether they're in the member list for the current room, right? So this would get super complicated if we tried to actually write that condition here, because that's a little bit of a thing. So we should probably make a separate method for that. So I'm writing for the method I want, not the method I have. So let's write it. Includes current user. And that will take a room as its argument. And how do we know? So it's room.members, right? Room.members is an array with a list of rooms, or a list of users. Or a list of something userish. Let's look at that. Do I have one? I have private. Yeah. Since I didn't successfully remove private room test last time, right? Because we had an issue there. Let's go ahead and delete it now. See if we fixed the delete issue. Oh, we didn't because I haven't done the filter. I haven't finished filtered rooms. Never mind. So let's see. Let's just have a look at private room test there. So here's my list of rooms. Here's private room test. Public is false. Users is an array. Let's look at these objects. Now, those aren't actual user objects, are they? With a display name and an email and a UID. They're select options, right? They're options for that dropdown. So they have a label and a value instead of a display name and a UID. So anybody run into this where like you were trying to compare UIDs or something and it didn't work?
Well, the value is the UID.
The value is the UID, right. But if you didn't remember that and just tried to say .UID, I mean, at least for me, I kind of forgot that at first and tried to compare it to something that wasn't there. So remember, these are not actually arrays of user objects like we store in the database. They are arrays of select options for that drop-down list. So value is the UID. So what I want to test here is whether let's see here. What do we have? If the room is public or if the current room includes that person as a member. There's some possibility, probably, that this room doesn't have a list of members, because some of them are older than that, though they should be public if that's the case. We could still, for safety's sake, say like const members equals room.members or empty array, because if I'm going to run an array function on this, I want to make sure I have an actual array, or I'm going to get whatever dot filters not a method or not a function. So which array method do I want? I have things like for each, map, find, filter, find. So find looks through it until it finds a match, right? That's all I need to know. Is this person in there at all? So that'll do. So members dot find, pass in a test. So each thing inside that array is, I'll call it a user option. It's not an actual user, right? And what I'd want to know is if user option dot value is equal to this dot props dot user dot UID. I want to return that. Make sense? So my test function here is checking whether this thing has a value that matches the UID of the person I'm logged in as. If so, then I know I'm in the member list. So even though this is a private room, I'm allowed in. So that should be good for this test. So what I need to do in filtered rooms is just, I think, return this. So object.keys gives me that array of room names. And then I filter that list. Although that only gives me the room names, right? This doesn't actually give me the rooms. This just gives me room names. Understand? So if the room doesn't exist, I know it's false. I know this is not an allowed room. Otherwise, if the room is public or if I'm in the list, then I return true, which means this thing gives me a list of room names. So I'm going to rename this to filtered room names. Then I think I'm going to make another method called filtered rooms. Because taking that list, saving it to a variable, and then filtering it further or mapping over it, that's just too much for one function for me. Plus, I can describe what this is doing. This is getting me a list of filtered room names. So filtered rooms, all it's going to do is do something with filtered room names, but still. Filtered room names, we'll run that, and then I kind of gave it away. I want to run map, right? Because I want to take that array and build a different array out of it. So that's going to give me a room name. And then I want to get this.state.rooms, square bracket that room name, and return this. So this also lets me kind of test these two functions in isolation. That lets me test all three of these in isolation. So private room test here. I don't actually know. I don't know who's in there. Filtered room names. What do I get right now if I do that? Whoops. This is main. Here's main. Here are all my rooms. If I say $R dot filtered room names, do I at least get a list of room names? I do. I get Fortnite only. So screwed that up. Why did I screw that up? Probably because all those public rooms aren't actually marked as public because we added them before we even had the field public, right? So any number of ways you can deal with this. This thing isn't even in production yet, so I'm just going to go ahead and go into the database and change them. Not that big a deal. Fortnite, public true, general, public, true. So notice how you do this. Like random does not have the field public. So hover over random, hit plus, add a field called public with a value of true. Hit enter. Let's try this again. Filtered room names now gives me Fortnite general and random. So it would appear that I should not be allowed in private room test. Who am I logged in as anyway? $r.props.user.email. I am fretless me, and that room private room test has Gmail me and fretless me. I should be in that list. That should have worked. It didn't. So here's the UID. Let's make sure that is my UID. $R props user UID. Okay, so that did not work. So let's get that room list again. State rooms. Private room test it's called. So room is r.state.rooms square bracket private room test. There you go. It is not public. So if I call $R dot includes current user, passing in that room, I get undefined. So it did not find it. So let's see, room dot members. You know what? This was before I changed it from users to members. So let's delete that rascal. Let's just delete it in the database. And let's add a new private room that we know I'm in. Make a new room. Call it private. It is private. Let's make sure I'm in the list. I'm the only person in the list. Now let's see what filtered room list gives me. Filtered room names. Fortnite, general, private, and random. I should be the only person in there, so if I sign in as a different me, let's make sure private room, filtered room names does not include it. So I'll log in as Gmail me. And go back to my React thing here, select this. Run filtered room names again, and now it's just Fortnite general and random. So we've successfully sifted the private room out of there. So what we've tested is it will definitely allow public rooms through, and it seems like it will not let private rooms through that we're not a member of, and it seems like it will let through private rooms that we are a member of. So I think we made it work. So now filtered rooms. Oh, that's filtered room names. So what about filtered rooms? Okay, it gives me the same 3 rooms, but as actual rooms. Okay, we made filtered rooms work. So now, when we pass that prop to the sidebar, rooms, instead of passing this.state.rooms, I'll pass this dot filtered rooms with parentheses, right? I'm not passing the function. I'm passing the return value of the function. Make sense? Cool. I like it. Save that. And now the private room is not listed. Sign out. Sign back in as the person who is allowed. There's private. Now, before we had a broken delete because we were allowing null ones through to the sidebar. So let's make sure we also fix that. Deleted. Yep. We seem to have fixed that too. All right. I think we did the first part of the homework. Remove restricted rooms from the sidebar. So that was a little involved. We're using a lot of our array functions, which is part of why array functions were part of your Code Wars things, a million years ago when you did those. Does this at least make sense as you see me do it?